Unfortunately, there are a lot of heavy-set, average-height, glasses-wearing men with brown hair in the San Francisco area. Hi, I'm Chansey,
And I'm Lila.
and this is for Criming Out Loud.
And I have been waiting all morning to tell a story because I had something that's not that wild, but honestly, it was wild for me. This morning I'm laying in bed and it's 7:30 and my alarm has just gone off and I've like done that thing, I've rolled over. I'm like, "Nah, 7:30, man. Not for me." Anyway, and so I'm laying there and it's like exactly 7:36 when I hear this thunk on my window. And I'm like, what the heck? Actually, initially, I didn't know what the sound was. It was just like this weird bang. And I was like, that was like right outside my window. What the heck? And then I like realized I was like, I think like a bird just flew into my window. And so I like went over to my window and there was nothing there. I didn't see anything on the window. I didn't see anything around the window. I was like, I don't know, weird. So I go back to bed again. And then, not 3 minutes later, there is a second louder thunk on my window. And I am like, what in the actual heck is going on? And I walk over there, and this time there is a bird that is lying on the ground right outside my window. And there's feathers stuck to my window. And I am like, okay. And so I looked at this bird, and it has like a broken wing, and half of its beak is just missing.
Oh my
I
gosh.
was like, you did some damage. Anyway, so then I was kind of distraught because I was like, do I kill it? Do I like put it out of its misery? Do I find a way to like just end its life? It's clearly not going to live that long. But for the third time that this morning, I went back to bed. And I was like, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to let it die in peace.
This didn't
I was like,
happen.
I
This
don't
didn't
know what to
happen.
do for it. But it was like sitting there, it was like convulsing, and it was like I was like, oh my gosh,
Oh no.
this poor bird. And it was not like a small bird. Also, I'm pretty sure it was probably this bird that hit my window twice. Like a stupid bird. I was like,
It like came
you didn't,
once. It was
and then
trying to
it
commit
tried again.
suicide.
I don't even know. Anyway, and so yeah, then I kind of ignored it for a couple minutes. And then I was like, I gotta go back and see if it died already. And I went back and it was sitting there and it just like looks at me through the window. And I'm like, oh. And then I think I like bumped the windowsill a little bit and it like just flew off. And I was like, okay.
So not dead.
So it's not dead. It probably will be dead. It has half a beak left. And it is
Oh
somewhere out
my
in the world.
gosh.
And this morning it hit my window 2 times. Anyway, but the first time it hit my window, I was like terrified because I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't think something had hit my window. I actually thought something had moved, like, the window well grate that's, like, just underneath my window. And like we've talked about before, my really paranoid self was like, somebody's breaking into my house through my window well. I was like, oh, my life is over. But no, it's just a bird that probably ends up killing itself in the long run that ran into my window 2 times this morning.
That's crazy. Window wells are the worst. They freak me out. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but those shouldn't be a thing. I don't like that at all.
Yeah,
So,
no, they're not great. And ours are like nice because they have like a plastic, they have like a grate on them, like a heavy metal grate, and then they have like a plastic covering over the top of them. And so, like, mentally, I'm like, I would hear if somebody was like moving that out of the way and then trying to get in through the window underneath. But I still was kind of like nervous because that's also the window we like leave open sometimes because we're like doing projects down in that room in the basement. And so I was like, we probably left it open. Somebody just got into my house. No,
somebody
just a
just went
bird.
in
We're all
there.
goods. All goods.
The bird was trying to rob you, but it failed. That's really what happened, I guess.
Yeah, little birdie. Anyway, there you have it. That was my
It's pretty
exciting
crazy.
morning. Yeah.
Very exciting. Kamikaze birds and paranoia. Super fun.
Yep.
Super
Basically.
fun. I've had a pretty exciting morning myself. And
Oh
let me
yeah.
tell you why. My roommate, for the first time since I moved in here, left her bedroom door open. And let me tell you why that's a
Okay.
big deal. Every time that she's left the apartment, ever, whether I've been here or not, she has locked her bedroom door like she doesn't trust me not to steal her things.
Well, I
She
mean,
like, which I get. We don't know each other that well. It's
yeah. I
great.
mean, it's really true. Yeah.
Whatever. Today, she left for work and she just left her bedroom door wide open. And I'm sure she's going to get home and be horrified that she forgot to lock it and then check everything she owns to make sure I didn't steal from her. But for now, it feels like a little bit of trust. So I feel like I'm making progress. That's my
Well, that's
exciting news.
exciting.
I
Me
thought
and my
so.
like devious mind, I was like, I just go in there and move a few things and make her panic.
No.
Like, not actually
Mm-mm.
take anything, not actually.
Not going to
Just
do
kidding. I
that.
wouldn't actually do that, but it does. Yeah, I'm the type of person that crosses my mind that I'm like, wouldn't that be funny if you just messed with her a little bit? It was like somebody is in your room. No, it's just
Yeah, it
me.
would have been funny if
If
she
you guys
wasn't
knew
so
each other, it
paranoid.
would be yeah. If you knew each other, it would be fine.
That's true.
But since you don't, yeah, it's not a good idea. It's not a
No,
funny prank.
no, it's not funny. I just
So
like closed her door a little bit so that it's not wide open because it makes me feel uncomfortable to see her room now that I'm just like I feel like I'm invading her privacy even though
like I didn't want to see that.
I
Feels
don't
weird now.
yeah.
You've made it weird.
Exactly. You made it weird. You made it weird by leaving your door open. Totally weird. Anyways, so sounds like we both had pretty exciting stuff going on,
Action
you
packed
know.
morning.
Action packed. Well, today we are talking about some pretty action packed stuff. Today we're talking about our first serial killer, which is
Ooh
pretty
la la.
crazy. Everybody's probably heard of this serial killer, even if they don't know much about it. And it's kind of crazy because it's basically become like a part of pop culture. Like when we think about serial killers and like the whole like sending messages and taunting police and putting together those messages that are made out of like magazine clipping words, you know what I'm talking about, with like the cut out words to make a full message.
Yeah, yeah.
That's where like this case is where those ideas came from, so that's kind of crazy. So today we're talking about the Zodiac Killer.
Okay.
Dun, dun, dun,
I feel like I have
dun.
heard episodes on this before, but not enough that I actually remember. So this gonna be exciting.
Yeah. I honestly don't know if I probably have heard this, but just wasn't memorable enough for me to like remember the details. But it is a pretty crazy case. The Zodiac, he terrorized Northern California in the 60s and 70s, and he mostly used the media to kind of spread fear. And as far as we know, he killed 5 people and attempted to kill 2 others, but there's also some like possible murders that are linked to him. So we're gonna just jump into it.
So he like didn't actually kill. Like I'm not saying that 5 people isn't like a ton of people, but he didn't kill like Ted Bundy levels of people.
No. He
This is just like
claimed to have
five.
killed a lot more than he did,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
it was just, to our knowledge, just 5 people, which is still way too many
Still a lot of
people to
people.
kill. Don't get me wrong. But as we'll see, he seemed to think himself much more prolific than he actually was when it comes to the whole serial killer thing. Like
Okay.
a lot of serial killers, he gave himself his own name
Gross.
and just kind of like gross, pathetic serial killer stuff. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, the first like time that we know of that the Zodiac strikes is in 1963. So it was June 4th, and there was an engaged high school couple named Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, and they were seniors at Lompoc High School in Santa Barbara. And they'd used their senior ditch day to go have some fun, and they drove to a beach near Gaviota State Park, and they were going to sunbathe, relax, just kind of enjoy the day together and not have to be in school because everybody gets senior ditch day. It's the best. And the two teens, they didn't return home the following day like they were supposed to. And so Robert's father went to the beach where they were supposed to be at and was like, I need to go find them, make sure everything's okay. And as he was searching the beach, he noticed this like bedraggled little shack on the shore that was like falling apart. He was like, maybe they're in there. So he went to go investigate. And I'm sure part of him wishes he hadn't because what he'd found inside was pretty gruesome. He found the body of his son, Robert Domingos, and his son's fiancee, Linda Edwards. He found them both lying on the floor of the shack, and they were both bound with rope. And it seemed like they'd both been trying to escape when they'd been shot. And police would investigate later and say that they'd been shot by a 22 caliber weapon, and Robert had been shot 11 times and Linda had been shot
Whoa.
9 times. So
Gee.
major overkill. Like nothing about that is necessary. One shot would have been more than enough. But they were both shot way more than one time.
Did the police, like, I don't know, maybe you're about to get to this, but did the police say that, like, they had been found in there? Like, maybe they were, like, having a little getaway together, hiding out in there, and then they were discovered there? Like, they weren't, like, forced into the shack and then found. Did they say
Yeah,
anything about that?
so they did actually. Investigators actually, based on the evidence at the scene, they believed that they had not been killed in the shack. They believed they'd been killed on the
Oh,
beach and that
and
the
then
killer had
dragged
then
there.
dragged them into the shack after he killed them.
Gee.
The reason they thought that they'd been trying to escape when they'd been killed was based on where the bullet wounds were, because a lot of them were in their backs, like they were running away
Right.
when they were shot. So, yeah, they think that the killer dragged them into the shack after they'd been killed, and they found evidence that the killer had tried to start a fire, but for some reason wasn't able to actually start it. So they found like, I don't, it didn't say specifically, but they must have found something that indicated that he'd been trying to start a fire. I don't know.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
at the time, investigators like basically had zero leads. Like there were no witnesses, nobody had seen anything suspicious, and it wouldn't be until much later that these two murders were actually connected to the Zodiac Killer. So, as far as we know, these two high schoolers were like the first of his victims, but police wouldn't put that together until like almost 10 years later. So, those were his first victims. So, now let's jump to 1966, which is 3 years after the first two murders. Um, we're in Riverside, California now, and there's a young woman named Sherry Josephine Bates who lived with her father, Joseph, and she was going to college at Riverside City College. And this is one of the cases where it's a possible connection to the Zodiac, but not like confirmed that he's responsible. So this one is kind of up in the air, but it's still for some reason linked to the Zodiac. So I just thought I'd mention it and
Is it
include it.
is it like one of the five that
It's not
that you
one of the
mentioned?
five.
So this is just like
No.
a an extra possible. Okay.
In all the sources that I read, they mentioned her. And so I figured I'd just include it because investigators seem to think that she's involved. I'm not sure exactly why based on the evidence, but let's talk about what happened to her. She was, like I said, she was in college, and so on October 3rd of 1966, she left a note for her father that said, "Dad, I went to the RCC library." So she was basically just telling him like, "I went to go study," or whatever. And unfortunately, he never heard from her after that note. And so the next day, her empty Volkswagen Beetle was found in the parking lot behind the library where she said she was going to be. And she was found nearby between two houses. And she had been stabbed multiple times, and her throat had been like brutally cut.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
during the investigation, the police like swept the scene, and they found a men's Timex watch, a shoe print from a military boot, and some hairs that were found in dried blood on her hand. And that was like basically like all the evidence that they found. And police noted that her purse hadn't been taken, like nothing was missing from her items. And when the autopsy was done, like they found that she hadn't been sexually assaulted. And so they couldn't really pin down what the motive was for her murder. Like there
Except for
didn't seem
just,
to be, yeah,
yeah, just
except for
murder.
just either random rage or like potentially somebody that she knew who had a beef with her, but they just couldn't nail down any suspects. So, a month after Sherry Joe's murder, a local newspaper got a letter that was called, like, entitled The Confession by the writer who sent it. And in the letter, the writer claimed that they had killed Sherry Joe. And so the next year, in April of 1967, so a year later, that same newspaper also got another handwritten letter, and the police got the same one. And it said, Bates had to die. There will be more. And the note was signed with what looked like a Z of some sort, like something Z related. And so I looked at these letters because they're all out there on the internet. Actually, I'm going to send you something so that you can look at them.
Deal. I do want to look at them.
So I'm not going to lie. If you go and look at this little note thing, it's not even a letter because it's only like literally 8 words. But it looks like a kid wrote it almost. Like the handwriting is really bad. Like, I don't know. I'm not an elementary school teacher. Lila, how close is this to like kid handwriting? I don't know. It just doesn't look like an
Um,
adult wrote it to me.
well, to be honest, what it looks like, yeah, this is me as a second grade teacher, and I struggle a lot with handwriting with my second grade students. And I will say this though, I think it is an adult that would have written this because kids typically have a really hard time keeping their letters the same size. Like you'll find that some letters are like teeny and some letters are like really big for like no apparent reason. But when you look at this letter, like all of the letters are capitalized first off, except for the L's, I guess, because those are lowercase. But the rest of them are capitalized, and they're all about the same size. But it looks to me like he's trying to disguise his handwriting. Like he's worried that like his actual handwriting could be like looked at and compared to something, so he's trying to throw him off by using like crappy handwriting.
Okay. All right. I can see that. That's good to know because when I looked at that letter, I was like, there is no way an adult wrote that. But maybe he was just, and also maybe he was like trying to fill an entire page worth of space. There's just like a lot of space and they're really big words. So he was probably just trying to like really shock people, I
Yeah,
guess.
I think so. But like his letters are so consistent that I'm like, he was just
Definitely not a kid.
he was just trying to throw people off. That's my opinion. But
Okay. Well, that
because
makes
like
sense because
die
I don't
looks
think
like
a kid
pie.
would do it. Die looks like pie.
I'm
Yes,
like,
it does.
he was
It
trying a
does.
little too hard there. But anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
Anyways, so he sent that like identical versions of that note to the local newspaper and also to police in that area. And so seems like also to me that he referred to her as Bates, which could also just be like him trying to avoid attention or whatever. But it seems like if he was more familiar with her, he'd use her first name, maybe. I don't
Right.
know. That just to me, like when you know somebody, like if it was a crime of passion or something, like it was like an ex-boyfriend or something like that, you'd think, I don't know. To me it just seems like they may use a first name, but probably not. Who knows? And so like I said, this case wasn't immediately like none of these cases that we're going to talk about were immediately linked together. It would take quite a bit for them to become linked because they were all in different areas. So police didn't really see them as connected. It wasn't until like the Zodiac started reaching out to the press and to police that they started to connect them. So I think that's part of the reason why Sherry Joe's murder is included in the Zodiac stuff because there were like letters and stuff that were sent to newspapers and and the police. Personally, I'm not so sure that this case is linked. The police, when the Zodiac Killer became more known and was kind of like a known serial killer in the area, police reached out to investigators that were working on the Zodiac case about Sherry Joe's murder, and they talked about the similarities and whatever. And that's when her murder was like officially kind of grouped into the Zodiac case. But over time, the police kind of moved away from the Zodiac theory and they focused on her ex boyfriend instead. So I don't
Well,
know. It's
it
confusing.
seems kind of interesting to me because the only thing that I will say that's fishy is, if I'm understanding this right, he didn't claim her death until a year later, right?
Yeah.
Like, he didn't write that letter until like a year later. And so at that point, her murder would have been public knowledge. So if he wanted to claim it and he wanted to pretend like he did that just to start, like people wondering and to, whatever, start his whole thing he's going to do, then I don't know. That would almost make more sense to me. Like, why would you claim it a year later? Why would you murder somebody and then wait a year? I guess was he hoping that they would like catch on to him before then, but he hadn't really like, I don't know. Seems weird.
Yeah, it does seem weird. And like what happened, one of the things that happened that made me think that the Zodiac maybe didn't do this, though, was so Sherry Joe's murder was officially linked to the Zodiac case. And then the LA Times like did like a little article about it and basically announced that Sherry Joe's case had been connected to the Zodiac. And then so this was like years later, right? Then the Zodiac actually said, like, he sent in a letter to the media. He said, I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. So to me, it seems like he's taking credit for something somebody else did because he's just trying to like get notoriety.
The only thing that's weird to me is like, how do I put this? Like, most serial killers, they don't wait that long between killing people, so I'm almost inclined to believe him that there's other victims and other bodies. You know what I mean? Because like, if we're sticking with the fact that like it was 3 years before her that like his first victims were, it seems like a weird time gap, like 3 years, and then like he waits a year to claim that murder. I mean, I don't know. It's just like a weird. Is that typical for the rest of his murders? Does he have these weird gaps of time?
I mean, he does. Yes. Like it seems at first that he had a lot of space between times that he would murder, and then they got more and more like frequent, and then eventually they just stopped altogether. So I don't know. It is a little bit weird, but it seems weird to me that like the letters that were sent originally to police, the ones that said like Bates had to die, there will be more, or whatever, like that, it seems like the Zodiac wasn't aware of those almost. Like he didn't, he seemed to be like almost contradicting himself, I guess, because why wouldn't police assume he was involved if they're getting weird letters from the killer when that's his MO? I don't know. It just seems weird for him to say
Yeah,
like, I'm going to give them credit for this. It's like, well, they are, the reason that they did this is cuz it fits your MO. Like you
yeah,
sent them letters. So it seems like he didn't know about the letters or the letters weren't his. It's just weird. I don't know.
yeah. Okay,
It could be
I get
anything.
that.
It could be that he's connected, it could not. But like I said, police, they decided to start investigating other avenues and they were really focused on Sherry Joe's ex-boyfriend, and in late 1990, so like forever later, 20 years later, they got like a DNA sample from Sherry Joe's ex and compared it to DNA that was taken from the hairs that were found on her hand at the time of the murder. And the samples that they had did not match. The DNA did not match her ex boyfriend. And so he was basically ruled out. So then it's like, well, then maybe it was the Zodiac. Like, if it wasn't her ex that was like the police's main suspect, maybe it had to be the Zodiac. I don't know.
Okay,
It
yeah,
does seem strange to me that there were letters written to media and police, just like all of his other cases. So I don't know. Either way, it's linked to his killings, but she's only like a
Okay.
potential victim. So, back in 1968, which is like 2 years after Sherry Joe's murder, the Zodiac was literally like just getting started. This is when the murders really started to pick up. He um, focused on Benicia, California, and this was 5 days before Christmas, so that's truly horrible.
Are all these places pretty close to each other? I'm not super familiar with California.
Yeah, so the first murders happened in Gaviota State Park, and that's like, I don't know, like an hour from like Los Angeles to the like
Okay.
west, northwestish. And Benicia is actually like closer to San Francisco up north in Northern California. So they're not super
They're not
close.
super close.
But Sherry Joe's murder was in Riverside, which would be a little bit closer to, that's close to Los Angeles. So it seems like Sherry Joe's murder and the murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards were all like kind of in the LA area. And then it's almost like he moved north because the next few murders are going to be in the San Francisco area.
Okay.
So Benicia
Okay.
is like 20 minutes from San Francisco or something like that. Fran.
Yeah. It's curious how easy it was to connect these murders, or if it would have been really difficult because they were like, I mean, they're far enough away, it probably was somewhat difficult.
Yeah, I think it definitely was hard for police to know. They were just in completely different police jurisdictions. They probably hadn't even like heard that they were a thing, let alone thinking that they were connected. So I think it took police quite a bit to finally get them linked up.
Yeah.
Um, so in Benicia, California, 5 days before Christmas, Betty Lou Jensen, which is like an adorable name, by the way. Betty Lou Jensen. I
Uh,
love that name.
it's like Christmas time, Cindy Lou Who, Betty Lou.
I know.
It's
It
very
gives you
cute.
like Whoville vibes. She was excited because she was going on her first date with David Faraday. And they were both high school seniors. And so Betty Lou promised her parents that she'd be home by 11 p.m. And then she went off on her date. And they left in David's car. And at around 11 p.m., a passing car saw a Rambler, David's car, parked on Herman Road in Benicia with David and Betty Lou inside. And so, like, around 11 p.m., it seems like they were, parking, you know, parking. And a little
Doing
bit
that thing.
later, that thing that high schoolers do, flaunting curfew and parking. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit later, a passing driver went by the same spot that they'd been seen like a few minutes earlier. And this time, however, the passing driver noticed that there were two like motionless bodies on the side of the road by this car. And
Oh,
so
gee.
police immediately were called and they came to the scene and they found Betty Lou had been shot 5 times in the back and was already dead when they arrived. And David was found right next to her and he'd been shot in the head and he was still breathing when police arrived, but he would die later in the hospital. So a fun date
Wow.
out had turned into something truly,
A
truly tragic.
nightmare. Yeah.
A real
So,
nightmare.
like, when you say he was alive, I'm sure he was, like, not able to speak,
No,
right? Like,
no.
he was
He
very
was
on the brink
alive,
of
but
death.
like, yeah, like barely breathing alive. Like, we need to life flight
Dang.
him to a hospital right now. Um,
That's so sad. He almost lived.
I know. And this will be a pattern that he leaves them still breathing. Like he doesn't confirm that they're dead before he leaves the scene.
Which
That's why
seems
some of his
really
victims survived.
risky. Seems way risky.
I agree. So, police would obviously go and investigate the scene of this crime, and they found bullet holes in the car's roof and back window. And so, police believed that the killer had like fired shots into the car to scare the couple into like leaving the vehicle to like get them out in the open. And there were
Yeah.
shell casings that were found that they identified as Winchester West Super X copper coated bullets.
Wow.
I have
Okay. Very
literally no idea
specific.
what that means, but it sounds intense, whatever it is. And the gun that was used was most likely a 22 caliber weapon, just like the gun that was used to kill Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards years earlier. It was the
Okay.
same caliber weapon. They couldn't obviously prove that it was the same weapon, but it was the same caliber weapon. And so police believed that these two people, they hadn't been like followed and then attacked. They believed they'd just been randomly happened upon and then killed. Like it wasn't a targeted thing. It was just
It's
more
just
random.
opportunity killing.
Yeah, exactly. And there weren't, like all the other cases, there were literally no leads. There were no witnesses. Police had no suspects, and they were just kind of at a loss. And like I said, these cases had, like, this case to me has more similarities to Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards murders. I don't see a lot of similarities with Sherry Joe's murders. But like I said, since one's in Los Angeles and one's in the San Francisco area, they weren't like able to connect them because there hadn't been a lot of police communication about it, which makes sense. Fast forward to July 4th, 1969. This is about 6 months after Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were murdered. It's a new year, and the Zodiac is still a thing, unfortunately. Darlene Farron was waitressing at a restaurant in Vallejo, California, which is also in the San Francisco area. And when she got off her shift, she picked up Michael Majou. I'm pretty
Whoa.
sure that's how you say that. I Googled it. So
That is a cool
let's
name.
say it's right.
I love names that
Michael
have
Majou.
alliteration. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book almost. It's fun.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Okay.
Yeah. And around midnight, they were parked in their car in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park. And some sources say that they had noticed like a light colored car kind of following them. Like the man in the car was like, they noticed him behind them multiple times while they were driving to this parking lot. Like that's just, I saw that in like one place. So I'm not sure how true that is. That's just something I saw. But while they were parked, a car pulled into the lot and then just kind of left. And they were like, okay, cool. And a little bit
Weird.
later, that same car pulled back into the parking lot and parked. And the driver came up to the car and shined a flashlight into Darlene's car. And it was like hard for them to see who it was or what was happening because of the light. And they assumed it was a police officer because that's like the police officer's thing, like the flashlight at night.
Yeah, that's
And
what they do.
so they rolled down the window to like talk to this person, and the man didn't say anything. And then he immediately began shooting into the car. One of the
My
bullets
gosh.
hit Michael in the right arm, and another hit Darlene in the neck, and she immediately slumped over unconscious. And at this point, Michael is like desperate to get out of the car. And he wasn't able to because the door handle on the passenger side was missing. Like, I don't know if it was just like a really old car. I don't know. But for whatever reason, there was no handle on the car on the passenger side.
Okay.
And
That's
so
terrifying.
he jumped into the back seat and was like trying to like basically hide from the assailant. And at this point, the assailant walked away from the car and went back to his own vehicle, but he didn't leave. And so Michael said that he did like the assailant did something that he couldn't see, and then it was like he noticed Michael because Michael was still trying to get out of the car, and he saw Michael, and the guy came back and shot four more shots into the car, two of them for each person. So he shot Darlene two more times, and then he shot Michael two more times. Once in the jaw, once in the leg.
My
And after the
gosh.
final shots were fired, the attacker finally got back into his car and drove away. And so, just weird. It was almost like he was leaving and then realized that Michael wasn't dead and came back and shot them again. Super weird.
Well, it's super weird that he doesn't like make sure that his victims are dead.
Yeah.
Like, isn't like you don't want to leave behind an eyewitness
No.
to your crimes,
No.
and like that's what he did. Obviously, Michael survives, I'm guessing, because
He
he
does
wouldn't have been able
survive.
to relay that information if he was dead.
Yep.
So good for
Yep.
Michael, but also that just doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't. And like there weren't actual witnesses to the crime, but there was somebody who was working he was like a caretaker for the golf course nearby, and he heard the attack happen around 12:10 a.m. And so he immediately called police. And then right after the attack, three teenagers drove into the parking lot and they saw the couple and they also contacted police. So they arrived like 10 minutes after the attack happened at 12:20 a.m. And so I think that like them being found really quickly helped it so that when they were rushed to the hospital, Michael survived. Darlene was actually still alive when they arrived at the scene as well, but she passed away like 20 minutes later in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what a great guy this is, just randomly attacking people in their cars. Um,
Yeah, I will say that's like
so
why the second victim that you mentioned doesn't seem to fit his MO either, because she was like slashed to death, not
yeah,
shot. And I
weird.
don't know what
That's
you'll say about
weird
the
to me.
next victims, but like he doesn't seem to like to get his hands dirty. He seems to
No,
like
there's not
cause terror and kill people, but like from a distance. It doesn't seem like he likes the like up close and personal bit.
exactly. And that's to me another reason why I think that Sherry Joe's murder just doesn't fit because most of the Zodiac's known victims were shot and killed, not stabbed to death. Most, if not
Hmm.
all. I feel like there might be one
Yeah.
more where stabbing is involved, but I can't remember right now. We'll get to it. But I don't, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. I don't know.
Okay.
Um, but because Michael survived, this was like the first like time a description was able to be given of the Zodiac. And like I said, the cases are not connected yet. They will be pretty soon after this, but at this point when they're first investigating these murders, like still not connected. So Michael said that the killer was a white man with a large face. He was heavy set and about 5'8" and weighed between 195 to 200 pounds. And Michael said that he had short, curly, light brown hair and that he had a pot belly and that he was wearing dark clothes and glasses. And unfortunately, there are a lot of heavy-set, average-height, glasses-wearing men with brown hair in the San Francisco area, so the description doesn't really lead to any suspects. And because he couldn't give a more like in-depth description because it was dark, and when the man came up to the car, he like it seems intentionally shone that light in their eyes so they couldn't see very well. But I don't know.
Yeah, probably was.
So another weird thing is that at 12:40 the night of the murders, a man had called Vallejo police from a gas station payphone and told the dispatcher that he was responsible for shooting and killing both people. So the dispatcher that answered the phone call said that the man sounded like his voice was low and monotonous, and the dispatcher said that the caller told them, "I want to report a murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." So
Imagine being the dispatch that picked up that phone
I
call
know.
and just
I
being
was
like, "What?"
Yeah, I was applying for a dispatching job, like just because I'm trying to find a job right now, and then I was thinking about that. I was thinking about last week's case with Susan Powell and having to be the dispatcher that got that call about the kids being trapped in the house with Josh. And then I was thinking about these kind of calls that the Zodiac like to do. And I was like, no, because I just know that I'll be the person that has to pick up those kind of calls. And I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do
Well,
it.
even if it's
Too much
not, even if
stress.
it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of stress. And even if it's just like, I don't know, like household disputes, it's still not fun to have somebody call you in distress ever, terrified. I mean, you only call 911 if you like, you got a problem. So, anyway,
It's true. So I
terrifying
ended up
call.
not applying to that job. I don't ever want to be on the other end of anything like that. So, like with all the other cases, there were like literally no witnesses, no suspects. They had no idea who had done this. There was just nothing. No evidence left at the scene other than shell casings. And at this point, like the only thing that would kind of alert police that these cases may be connected was that this man had claimed to kill two other kids the previous year. And it seems like he was referring to Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, but they didn't know for sure. But what would really kickstart the investigation and kind of link all of these murders was a letter that like three newspapers in the San Francisco area got. It was like a basically identical letter that was sent to all three places on July 31st in 1969. So this was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks after um, Michael and Darlene were attacked. So the letters were sent to the Vallejo Times Herald, the San Francisco Examiner, and the San Francisco Chronicle. And they all received the same letter, basically. They were handwritten, that claimed responsibility for the Vallejo murders and the Benicio murders. And the letter like gave information about the victims and the weapons and the type of ammunition that was used and how many shots were fired and all that stuff to kind of prove that they had actually committed the murders. And there was also a cipher that was included in each of the letters. And each of the letters contained only one part of the cipher. So like a third of it went to the Vallejo Times Herald, a third of it went to the San Francisco Examiner, and then a third of it went to the San Francisco Chronicle. And the letter like demanded that they publish the ciphers by the 1st of August of that year in 1969.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and I ain't trying to be this person, but number one, if I'm looking at the right thing, he spells Christmas wrong. So
he
he
spells
ain't
a
the
lot
most
of things
bright.
wrong.
Like, he does it two times. Like, he actually thinks that's how you spell Christmas. He puts two
How does
S's
he
at the
spell it?
end.
Oh, Mass.
Christmas.
Weird.
Sir. I
I didn't
mean,
notice that. Sir,
yeah.
you spelled that wrong.
Sorry, I just like that bothers me for some reason. That makes me feel like he's not very intelligent because Christmas is like one of those words that like even children can spell because you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's like in other letters, because this becomes a thing that he does, he sends letters. And in other letters, he spells things like the word like having. He spells the word having wrong multiple times. He puts an E in it instead of just Having. He puts Having. But he does it multiple times in all of his letters. And they're all handwritten. So that's weird to me too. And if you look at the handwriting on these letters, to me, it's a completely different thing than the letters that were sent in the Sherry Joe Bates case. Like, different style of letter. I don't know. It
No,
doesn't seem like it was the same person to me, but it could be.
yeah, I would say it's really hard because the first one's like written in all caps, but even when you look at, I don't know, it's hard. Like when you look at the capital D, like I pointed out, even that seems like a little bit different. But I don't know, the capital B looks weirdly, I don't know. You could spend all day analyzing that, obviously. It's possible
Yeah.
that it's the same handwriting though. I mean, it's not that far off when you look at the way that he writes his capital letters. and the last one was in all caps. But I just don't know why he would like all caps make it like weird the first time and then just like straight up commit the next time. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me.
It
But
does. The MO just seems wrong to me. I just don't know. Maybe he changed his MO. I have no idea. It
and
just
it's
doesn't seem likely to
possible.
me.
Maybe he thought that like with something that undetailed he could get a chase and then it didn't work. So then he was like, I gotta give him more clickbait. I'm gonna tell them exactly what I did. And then it was me. And I'm gonna give them a little code here that they gotta figure out, a little message.
Yeah.
What a creep.
And yeah, just basically this guy, he's just weird and just like seeking attention and trying to like make people afraid for no reason. He's a bully. He's probably
Yeah.
like some small little man that's unhappy with his life and just needs attention and needs to feel like he's bigger than other people. And so he's trying to just like play this cat and mouse game with the police and with the media. And the media, they publish these letters and the ciphers.
Why would you do that? Why would you play into that?
One of the things, the only thing I can think of is they probably wanted ratings. But another thing is that the Zodiac claimed that like by deciphering the cipher that they would like catch him, that it was like a hint to who he was or whatever. And so all three parts of the cipher were published in their respective newspapers. In response to these letters, the police basically asked the writer to prove that he had actually committed the murders. And so on August 4th in 1969, the San Francisco Examiner got a letter from the same guy and he gave more details about the murders. I read this letter and this is kind of his, it's called the Zodiac debut because it's the first time he like names himself as the Zodiac. It's the first time he uses that term. So he starts this letter by saying, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. In answer to you asking for more details about the good times I had in Vallejo, I shall be very happy to supply more material. By the way, are the police having," he spelled having with an E, "a good time with the code? If not, tell them to cheer up. When they do crack it, they will have me." So again, the letter indicates that if you just crack the code, you'll be able to catch me, blah, 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 blah. And the media went crazy for this. It was sensational, whatever. They wanted people working on the ciphers. And actually, within like days of like publishing these ciphers, two high school teachers who were just like into decoding things, Donald and Betty Hardin, they literally solved the cipher in 2 days. And
Really?
they said it wasn't even that hard. It was like solving the Sunday crossword or whatever. Like it's like literally not hard at all. And the cipher said, quote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." End quote.
So what they're supposed to gather from that like he's a hunter? Like what do you that doesn't even mean anything. That doesn't mean he's even necessarily a hunter. That's not a clue.
It's not a clue. He's just jerking people around. He doesn't actually want to get
Also,
caught.
no. Real curious how they like I'm looking at the cipher and I'm like wondering how you would ever decode that much from that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't get it. I looked at it too and I was like, I would have had no idea where to start. But apparently it's not an
Like,
overly complicated cipher once you like, if you're familiar with that sort of thing. Apparently it's not
right.
like that hard. But I looked at it and I was like, I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that. It's weird.
Because like when I'm looking at the cipher, like they didn't know what each symbol meant, right? Like they figured out what each letter was. Like they figured out that like the upside down T is an R and like the triangle is an S, and you know what I mean? That's really interesting, and I would not have any clue how to solve that.
Me neither. I didn't really
There's
study
an
this
E
before.
that's
I
a
just kind of looked
W,
at it.
and there's an E that's like an O with a dot in the middle.
Yeah.
They're not
Obviously these
always
high school
consistent.
teachers were like way smarter than me. Like
Yeah,
way
because
smarter
I'm
than
like,
me.
I don't get it. Anyway,
I would have
okay,
looked at that and
sorry.
been like, I'll leave it to the authorities. I'm not good at that.
Glad somebody
Anyways,
was. Not that it helped.
I have no idea if the police also deciphered it or not, but the media talked about these two that had decoded it or whatever. So, despite the letters saying like these ciphers will lead you to me, you'll catch me if you just like figure out these ciphers. Obviously, that was not the case, and obviously they like this Zodiac person was just playing games. And that's where we're going to leave it for this week. There's a lot of information with the Zodiac, so we're going to do two parts, and we're going to finish talking next week about the rest of the people that he attacked and killed, and then talk about his communications with the media and police and the police's investigation. So that's something to look forward to for next week.
Dang, I'm excited. I want to know who the freak is that did this.
Wouldn't we all love that? So until next week, you can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at forcomingoutloud_podcast. We're at Twitter at crimingoutloud. We have an email. Gmail us. We're forcrimingoutloud@gmail.com. We have a website, forcrimingoutloud.com. Find us, like us, share us, whatever you want to do, and we will catch up with you next week for part 2.